Vincent here from Chattermill. Big thank you to the previous panelists. It was really super insightful to hear more from Marley, Brian, Zach, and Michael on the first topics. In this session, we thought we will keep very much the real-life stories as well as the actionable tips and tricks. So we'll be hearing from both Meg Howe, who is our product at Indeed, as well as Axel Desaniol, who is Chief Product Officer at Cobuz. And maybe to actually just break the ice, Meg, do you want to speak a bit more about Indeed as well as what you own there?
Sure. Yeah. So as Vincent mentioned, my name is Meg Howe. I'm a director of product management at Indeed. Indeed is all about getting jobs for job seekers. So we are a two-sided marketplace where we bring jobs to the job seekers, and our goal is to make the job search easy and fast for the job seeker. I'm focused on a lot of the matching functionality within the AI experience. So using a lot of machine learning, LLMs, and also tying that to the user experience to make sure that we're providing an optimal AI experience that connects job seekers to the jobs that they're looking for.
Thank you, Meg. Axel, would you want to share more about Cobuz to people who are not necessarily French or music aficionados?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. So I'm Axel, I'm CPO at Cobuz. So Cobuz is a French music streaming service. It's been launched in 2007, so it's been here for a while. We do streaming and download, which means that streaming is just like Spotify, if you're familiar with them, or Apple Music, or all these services. And download is about purchasing music, so you can also purchase just like you would do on iTunes. And the main key differentiator of Cobuz initially was that we provide music in its original quality. So it was all about audio quality, at least in the beginning. And also that we provide a lot of editorial content on top of the music catalog. Other than that, it's very similar, but it's in the end providing a very active music experience. So using Cobuz, generally you are more active than just pushing play and listening to music. So we are a team of 10 product people, and my main focus right now actually is a shift that I'm trying to support as much as possible internally in the strategy of Cobuz. And so we're trying to move away from just the focus on audio quality and try to maybe broaden a bit our communication, which still include audio quality, but add other existing aspects of Cobuz that were not highlighted before and that are toward conscious consuming. So I spend a lot of time pushing this shift internally and maintaining the focus on what matters.
Thank you, Axel. And this shift is super interesting, and I think we'll get back to it as it's actually a real life story, which is I find super cool. But first, what we've been seeing is that most product teams are very much versed and used and familiar and high maturity in terms of using quantitative data, whether it is using behavioral data from product analytics, or if it's transactional data from operational data from any data warehouses. But what we've been seeing is that qualitative data is still something which is not yet as popular as the cousin on the quant side of things. So I was wondering, Meg, you are a heavy also data team, both on the quant and qual side. I was super curious to see if you could be sharing, when do you have a tendency to use quant data? When do you think that qual data is better?
Yeah, sometimes I think about when you're defining a new product experience. I think a lot of us are in this world of the AI agentic chat experience, and that's new for a lot of folks to build that product. And so a lot of that is going to be, putting something out there, defining what is the right experience for the user. But also as you're doing that, doing some quick prototyping, iterations, getting screens in front of users to get their feedback of what feels right, what is your expectation to help drive the product vision. The other thing, so I find qualitative and user insight to be very helpful in that instance. Although you can't forget to also incorporate like quantitative analysis as well. So one way to think about prioritizing when you're doing a new feature is what cohort of users are you thinking about, and what dominates your feature usage to help you prioritize. That's something we're working through right now. You want to solve all the problems for all users, but that's not always feasible, especially with a world we live in today where there's always tight timelines and deadlines. So using the quantitative data to help prioritize, in addition to getting that user insight early and often, usually sets you up for success in further defining your product vision.
Thank you so much, Meg. I really like the mental model of qual data for really discovering the early phase, or validating assumptions, iterating over the value, the pain, the problem space plus the solution, while quant data more for optimizing the solutions and prioritizing this based on the segments. It actually makes perfect sense. Super clear. Thank you so much. Axel, when we had a prep call, you mentioned actually one super cool feature, which was what actually that you prioritized on the back of insights coming from qual data. Would you be able to share this with the group?
Yeah, sure. So we very often prioritize stuff based on user feedback for sure. When there's a critical issue, it's going to be prioritized right away. Feature requests, often if it makes sense as part of the product vision we're trying to achieve. But yes, there's this interesting case that was born from user feedback, and so we were actually working on one of the core section of Cobuzz, which is the user library. So that's a key section. Everyone uses the user library. I mean, most of our users anyway. And so we wanted to completely redesign this section. And so we had been talking about this for quite a while, and we started to work on this and decided to conduct user interviews to try to make sure we understand all the aspects of it and what's the most important things we had to work on, and also define the scope of it, because it can be quite big. There are tons of potential ideas to incorporate in a redesign of the user library. So we conducted these interviews, and it helped us to define a bit the scope of the project. But also what I think is interesting when you do user interviews is that you have kind of a free discussion with your users. And so this can lead to discuss things that are not directly related to the main topic you're interested in. And it can be a lead for other ideas for later. And so that's what happened during this conversation. We noted an interesting idea that we didn't work on right away, but it resonated with us. We decided to mark it down and keep it safely to remember later, because it really we felt that it was making sense, although we didn't know exactly when we would do this. It was going to be a second step, but we decided to dig it a bit. So among all the leads that you get, some might come back again, and so you start to feel that there's something there. Some are relevant just with what you're trying to do overall, and that was maybe not an idea that you had before, and that's what happened there. So we conducted some additional survey to dig a bit, and it ended up being something super exciting, actually. That's more concrete right now, so I can talk a bit about it. We just released a first big step of this last week. So it's basically two channels that are very common in the way listeners discover new music, which are labels and awards. So maybe I think the right English term is press accolades. And so this is not something that's highlighted in the most music streaming services. And that's channels. These are channels that listeners use very often. It's common, and that's part of a daily, listener activity. And so we've decided to work on these. It was actually relevant because we already have bits of these features, but it completed these features and they now make sense, whereas before it was just kind of an intermediary state that didn't really push our product very far, and it felt like it was not complete. So these user interviews led us to have these leads. We dug a bit, was very interesting, led to a real project, and now we launch and we get like super interesting feedback. So it's a bit early to conclude, but yeah, user interviews can lead to more, and not necessarily the main focus from the beginning, but nice ideas, nice additions to the initial topic.
Huge congrats on the launch last week. It's going to be very interesting to monitor. What I really like is that the user research really allowed you to really have this like early insights. You needed to have maybe more momentum around this, validated by more like surveying after this to actually confirm the potential of the capabilities. That's super cool. And there is one more example that I think you shared, which I think is like phenomenal. Is in the introduction you mentioned that right now you are doing a changing to your messaging and value proposition as well, which I believe also is backed or was coming from insights from qual data. Would you be able to also share that story?
Yes. So I'll try to make it not too long. So cut me if I'm taking too much time. But so that's a big change for Cobuzz that happened recently. We had always been all about audio quality, and we were talking only about this in our communication. And we were not having we're not satisfied with this. Our competition was evolving toward the same kind of audio quality features that we had. And so the differentiation started to make less sense and was not enough. So we were kind of trapped, actually. We had only this that we were putting forward. We were tracking, of course, user feedback, but if you base everything on user feedback, there's a trap there, which is that you're just pursuing kind of the average of what people are expecting for a music service, but it doesn't lead you to a significant differentiation. And so you need to, frame this in a way that's going to, offer a unique value proposition that's interesting and that can lead you to growth. So that's a goal for most company, I guess. So we did a big work to redefine our strategy. We did a complete review of where we were standing, our values, what the competition was offering, our strength, and the trends on the market. And so to do this review, of course, we based this work on a lot of user feedback and other sources. And doing this, we defined a new unique value proposition that connects with everything we were. So and that led to a product vision that's aligned with this new strategy. And so in a nutshell, that's being a service that really care about music, and it's not just about providing music 24/7 with 100 millions of tracks and all the ecosystem that you usually expect from a music streaming service, but more having values that we think are important, like audio quality is still part of it, but becomes kind of not talking technical, just saying that we provide the original audio quality product by artists. All the editorial content is we want to push culture, we want to support culture and help people explore and learn about what they're listening to. We are paying artists more on average than all other music streaming services. We never communicated on this until last week. So last week was a big week. We released an article where we actually went completely transparent on how much we pay per stream, which is something that no music streaming service has done so far. And we felt confident doing this because we are number one. Our subscription are a bit higher in price. We don't do ads. There's no freemium. So it results in a super good pay per stream. So We never communicated on this. We have a club where people can discuss music and share about music, which is something that's important. We have initiatives on environment, and all these together are good values, and we want to talk about them because they're already there, and we are working to improve them. And that's for conscious consumer, things that are relevant because you want to put your money where your values are and make sure you're aligned. So we built the organization for this. We now focusing on the execution. And so how user feedback is used when doing all this, it's just user feedback helps you understand your positioning. I think so. The positioning, it's important to have a good definition of it in mind. It's not what the marketing department says you are. It's what your users are saying about you. And so you need to know your learn from your user feedback how you're perceived, what they get from your company. So you need to take this into account because that's part of your DNA. Also, what they were saying about what our users are saying about all the aspects, the new aspects we want to talk about, like artist remuneration, culture, these were valued by our customers, and we knew this, and it really made sense to put this under light. And all these new aspects, are they relevant to our users? And are they relevant to the users we might potentially add to the service? So these are really key questions. So that's how I think user feedback is really key to redefining your strategy, and how it was for us anyway. And if you don't take this into account, maybe you're going to kill your business and start from scratch, which is a possibility, but not what we wanted to do.
I really like this example. Thank you so much, Axel. So what I really like is you share two examples concretely, one which actually is discovering a new feature, important, but it's an iteration that actually was not in the space. So it's discovering something that is not expected necessarily on the music streaming service, which actually was added. And on top of this is really showing that you can use some of this qualitative data to also make some more strategic changes to the business, which I think is super interesting. And what I like to this is really I think it's also what in the previous panel, what people were saying in terms of leaning to your own strength, right? You realize, right, the business was, the audio quality was difficult to differentiate on, and therefore you need something more powerful, really realizing by understanding your customers, your users, that they really care about artists and the way they consume their contents, really being able to lean on that is super, super powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. So how do we get there? So we all sit on tons of data where these are explicit feedback coming from user research, surveys, or if it's implicit feedback on support conversations. What I was curious is Meg, you spend quite a bit of time on operationalizing the process typically of managing and collecting this qualitative data at Indeed. We're able to share some of your learnings, what actually is currently working really well on your side.
Yeah, for me, at the crux of it, it's really bringing UX and data science and all the folks in early and often. So when you're putting together a product vision, bringing them into the room to make sure that they're a part of the conversation. When right now in the current state I'm in of building out a new experience for the job seeker, it's not like we are just reinventing, how people do job searching. It's the pain points are still the same. And so we can glean, get information that already exists from the job seeker, from the user on what their pain points are today. In addition to, okay, what do we not in a new experience, we need to gather information from the user and, provide the right experience for them. And one example from a previous job on kind of how these things, they need to be in the room at the same time. At a previous job at Strava, it's a fitness tracking app where you can track your runs, your bike rides, all the things, and you can get kudos from other people. And a lot of that is GPS based. So if you're going on runs from your home or your work, that could be sensitive information that you don't necessarily want to share. So when I joined Strava, this feature is called enhanced privacy. If we looked at the data, it was like, oh, people they enable this privacy feature. And so that could be considered a thumbs up, we're good. But bringing UX research into the room and customer success, we got a completely different picture of what was actually happening with this feature. And the athletes were, providing commentary on, this is so confusing, I don't understand what this means. I want to protect my location. Does this do this? It was very clear that there was confusion as to how this feature was working, even though the numbers indicated otherwise, that people were using it, they were enabling it, and that was great. So once we got more insight, we were able to define, okay, or we understood the problem. We could have a starting point that we needed to dive into. And that still necessitated further user research to better understand, okay, quick prototyping, get the user's feedback immediately, et cetera. And I mean, it was to the point where we also, we were in the news, like people had blog posts about issues with this feature. So it's always interesting, like the data tells one story, but once you apply, more of the user insight, it adds so much more to that story. So that is something that I've learned too, is go into the room with senior leadership with that complete story. So data says one thing, the behavioral data can tell you a lot of information, but the additional insight from the users is what you need. So that's one thing, is a lot of this probably already exists. You just need to bring the right people in the room to get that insight. And then just further have the conversation with your users to ensure you're delivering the right thing for them.
Really, so qual data in that context of Strava was really bringing the color to actually explain specific behavior so that you understand better, and actually you can having that empathy towards the users and understand the behaviors behind the hard data.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I think you mentioned really that you want everybody to be in the same room, right? You mentioned the product design, data scientist, and I think you had some really cool way of ensuring alignment with your UX researcher. And I believe you also you shared your template, by the way, which we should share with the whole audience if they are for anyone working with UX researchers. Would you like to share the key insights in how to work efficiently with your UX researchers?
Yeah, I think so. This template, it might be well, of course, this makes sense. But I think as product managers, there's so many things that we have on our plate. It's collecting the user insight. It's the qualitative aspect. It's reporting back to senior leadership. It's working with engineering. So sometimes it's nice to have this refresher of wait, how should I get this started for UX research as you're defining kind of your product vision? So it's a list of questions to kind of get you on that track of, working with your UX researcher. So it's what product are you looking to build? What is the ideal user story, or what is the ideal experience? What supporting evidence do you have currently? Sometimes it might be well, personally, my experience with job searching is X, but as we all know, as product managers, you can't use yourself as the key user unless you're just building something for yourself. Then go for it. But you might need some more metrics for the business case. And then also kind of what is the supporting evidence that's missing, and then who would be best to talk to in order to answer these questions. So those last two questions really hone in on what are the questions we need to be asking, and who do we need to be asking them in order to either support the evidence of this is the ideal product experience, or shift entirely. And the one thing I will say is, while it might be frustrating, sometimes you get so many good nuggets out of the conversations with the users that your product vision might change drastically. And that's okay. That's exactly what you want. If you leave UX research and your product vision is still the same and the ideal user experience, I would almost question your approach, or if you're listening, that kind of thing. So yeah, I can share this template out. I have also an example in there of a feature for someone who's buying or selling their house, which I'm in the thick of right now. So I feel the pain of all of that. So I would like this product if someone wants to build it.
Hopefully, the new house will be coming soon and will be not too painful. Yeah. We will soon be going into Q&A, so feel free to actually drop questions in the chat, and we'll get back to it. We've got a couple of more questions before we go to the Q&A. So I really like, Meg, that in the template, what I heard, like the key things is what I'm trying to achieve, but like, especially what evidence do you have and what are you missing? And this is like super insightful for user researchers to say, okay, this is really what I want to actually steer the research on, and really be able to make sure that we get the answers to the questions, which I think is super insightful. There's also one more benefit which you mentioned during the prep call, which I think was super insightful, which was using qual data at times to be able to help the PMs take a step back from the daily grind and over optimizing specific KPIs. Do you want to share a bit more that experience as well, in the benefit, the side effects, or the byproduct of using qual data?
Yeah, we are we love a good A/B test. So I find sometimes, like, I'm sitting in these update meetings where I'm hearing from other product managers that they're working, they're shifting something ever so slightly. And I kind of have these moments of like, okay, what is this what big picture is this contributing to? And so I love having those moments with product managers who aren't necessarily as involved or aware of like the benefit of, user insight can provide to like expanding your roadmap. And so we'll have conversations with like my own product managers or PMs on other teams to ask like, what information are they gathering about, like, from the user to kind of expand on what they're trying to accomplish here. And that I've seen that kind of that light bulb effect happen when, you're so ingrained into like moving the metric, and maybe it's moving the metric by like 0.5%, which there's definitely benefits to that as well. But when you have that moment of like listening to what the user wants, and being able to define a new feature or expanding on your existing feature or product to meet those needs, you're looking at different metrics in a different way, and getting, that feedback from the user on how things are improving from them. So I try to push that on my team and other PMs to make sure that that element is incorporated into roadmap planning and product visioning and things like that.
Thank you so much, Meg. So really the importance to get the perspective to also make sure that you don't necessarily hone in too much on this 0.5%, which still at the scale of Indeed is massive, right? So I would assume that from a financial perspective, this 0.5% is having like significant material improvements. But yeah, I understand like the importance to also like make sure that you understand the why and still being connected to the end goal and the users. The last question before we go into the Q&A. So all of this that we discussed will lead to a very large amount of feature candidates. And as we all know, capacity is limited. Saying no is usually our middle names. So Axel, would you like to share like a bit more like your prioritization framework and how you go through this huge volume of feedback in making sure that you keep the whole team aligned in what is coming next?
Yeah, sure. So that's really interesting for our music streaming service. Like there's a lot of passion from our users, but also everyone internally. And like Meg was saying, when you're a product manager, the goal is not to do your product, but that's very tempting. But so something we implemented that works well for our company size, at least, is we've defined this new mission. We've adapted the organization accordingly, so we have teams in front of each main goals we are trying to pursue, and we define like KPIs to measure key improvements, like high-level KPIs, a few, like we have 10 basically. And each squad, because we organized in squad, have strategic topics. We try to formulate them in a problematic manner and not define a solution. So that's a very common issue, to say, okay, let's do this rather than let's improve these pain points. And so this leaves an interesting room for leveraging the user feedback and trying to build the best solution according to users and not having some precise solution in mind right from the start. And so the framework we use is very basic, actually. So each squad is gonna basically reference all potential initiatives that were raised by anyone, can be someone internally, by users, by the squad themselves. And so we'll assess each of them through their potential impact and efforts. And so we have a score which goes from 1 to 3 for each. So impact, we've defined a list that qualifies to rate something 3, 2, or 1. And so this eliminates quite a lot of potential initiatives. It makes making things easy. So for instance, projects that will get a 3 score will be mandatory projects. So there's no discussion. It's no-brainer. We have to do them, and not much to debate. Projects that have a very clear and high return on investments. So it can be as simple as we are going to raise prices. So that's pretty easy to, calculate how it's going to improve revenue. But it can be like country opening, like many kind of initiatives, actually. Things that we feel are really core to help us achieve the product vision. So this is a little bit more vague and is room for pushing projects that we need to then support and explain well. But product vision achievement, of course, strategic differentiation, and lastly, ugly things such as like unstable sections that are widely visited by our users. So we try to prioritize. If it's like a bug fix, we're not going to discuss it as part of the roadmap. But if it's like a big section that's not working well, that's broken, we're going to prioritize and try to. We don't have much anymore, but we used to have a lot of these. And so these are score 3 for impact. 2 will be like topics with significant feedback. Will likely have an impact, but not clearly estimable. So many potential initiatives will fall in this category. And 1 is clear initiatives, but low impact, or initiatives where we are not sure of the impact. We feel it's a nice idea, but it lacks data support and maybe user feedback. And we also try to assess the effort as well. So very basic, how long is it going to take to the squad? Like 1 cycle, organized in 4-week cycles. So 1 cycle or less, 2 to 4, over 4. And that's the score 1 to 3. And so basically this makes it quite easy. That's pretty basic, but it gives the first good readability of the potential initiatives for each squad. And that for each initiative, we do we do what we need to be clear about what we're trying to do, why we want to, why it makes sense to do this, and why it matters. These are the main reasons why we defend, we'll support this initiative priority. And we try to analyze the impact of it as much as possible and translate it as much as possible. So we really make sure that's very important. Like we translate this business in a business KPI. So it's not always easy, especially when it's features that will change engagement, but we try to translate this to business impacts. And so basically, using this framework so far was really successful, and we didn't have much debate and disagreement internally about what we should do next. But I think it's also helped by the fact that we define a clear direction for the whole company and for the product evolution. And so we communicate a lot on every of these. When we change something in the roadmap, we spend time with each team to explain why and the rationale. So everyone has this in mind. and that's something we do regularly. Like we talk a lot. We really try to improve the way we communicate on all the decisions of prioritization. I hope it's clear, but
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. So what I really love is the super clear directions that is kept on being like refreshed regularly as soon as there is changes. It's like super clear ways to identify like predictably, typically like the result of your score for a new initiative, typically like having the different buckets being clearly identified, having a clear definition of impact and effort, so that you kind of already know how this actual initiative will be compared with other initiatives. And so super insightful. Thank you so much, Axel. Time for questions. So I think Catherine, yes, we will be sharing the template that Meg mentioned. I really think it's like super insightful. You're like really being able to set up the alignment with your UX research team. So more than happy, like we definitely need to get back to you, Catherine, with Meg's templates. Stephen, I think you mentioned any insights on how to accord weighting between qualitative versus quantitative data insights. Meg, do you want to start on the weighting between being able to, like, how do you compare qualitative and quant insights? How do you make the combo and the weighting between both of it?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, I think when there's something that, like, in my mind, if there's something extremely conflicting between the two, that just means you need to keep digging to better understand like what is happening here with the quantitative data and why is it not matching up with the qualitative. We are fortunate where we like store and collect a lot of data, but we're compliant with it. So just want to make sure that is stated. And we are able to kind of like look at behavioral data and kind of get insights from that. But again, like I personally cannot go with just data. Like I have to have, the user insight to complement that and identify those gaps, kind of what I was mentioning before, like, like the user insight will help further define your product vision and your product goals. So I wouldn't use one over the other necessarily, but they do have, like, complementing one another is key.
Thank you, Meg. Axel, how about you? So weighting, qual data and quant data.
Yeah, I think it depends on. I mean, currently within the product team, so we're a small team. We don't have like a dedicated user research team, and we do this ourselves. And I think we're really beginning with this, where we're not experts in this domain. But what a basic thing we're trying to achieve is like define a clearer workflow for our user research. And basically, we are currently working on a simple table where we list, depending on the stage of an initiative, the time we have to allocate to the user research on this initiative. Sometimes it's going to be none, but we're trying to. It can be very small time as well. The different methods that could be used. Some of them might rely on quantitative or qualitative, but knowing what stage you're at, what's the purpose of your user research, what are the main questions and things you want to clarify, will lead to choosing, I think, a solution to get answers and try to clarify. Yeah. And so that's how we're gonna, I think, define whether to use qualitative or quantitative. But most of the time we're going to use a bit of both. But I think if you clarify what's the question you're trying to answer, this leads to what you need, and it's going to be quantitative or qualitative.
Thank you so much. Just to, like, we are way out of time, and I apologize for running over. Just one quick one. So Nathan is asking, I think more for you, Axel. If you're PM in a smaller team with fewer resources, how many customer interviews will usually need to prioritize? Is there a golden number in terms of number of interviews that you would like to run?
I don't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, Meg.
Go. You, Axel. Yeah. You go.
No, I mean, usually when we do interviews, we don't do like hundreds of them. We do like 10, 15. I think one is better than zero. It's interesting because part of the the things we're trying to define for our user research is also basics, such as when you're using quantitative data, what sample size you need to get reliable data. And so going from 0 to 1 is going to bring a lot of values, and 1 to 2 still quite a lot, and progressively less and less. And when you've met like 15 people, you already, I think, get very interesting data. If you push this further, I think it's quickly going to require more resources. And I think I saw some point about product ops, and we don't have such roles at Cobuzz, so it takes quite a lot of time to organize this. If you do like an hour interview, it's a lot of time. So we do it as much as possible, but have obviously not the opportunity to do this on a daily basis.
Thank you, Axel. What about you, Meg?
Yeah, I was going to say there's not really a magic number, but I noticed there was a mention of like when you're not getting new insights. So it's like enough insight to like start to identify themes. And if it's all over the place, then I would almost like question the focus of the questions that you're asking or the interviews. But it is important to like note who you want to interview, like what does that cohort look like, to make sure that you're like getting those insights that you want and they're not all over the place. So yeah, I don't think there's a magic number, but enough where you can start to identify those themes.
Thank you so much, Meg. Thank you so much, Axel, for today. It's been very, very insightful. And thank you, everybody, for being with us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.